Today's topic is improving customer focus through business relationship management. My name is Gary Case. I'm Principal Consultant with Pink Elephant, and I am here to tell you that I am very passionate about business relationship management. I think it is one of the best processes that is a part of the ITIL service lifecycle. I think it can be used in every organization, no matter how big or how small or what type of industry that you're really working in. Today, what we want to talk about is an introduction, first off, of the Business Relationship Management Institute, which is a new institute to help support the business relationship management activities on a global basis. As a part of that, we'll go in and talk also about the House of Business Relationship Management you know, what the foundation and the pillars and the roof kind of look like and how it all fits together. And then we'll get directly into, from the ITIL perspective, is really what's the business relationship management purpose, objectives, and overall scope. Part of what we need to do is always understand the difference between what is business relationship management responsible for and what is service level management responsible for. Also, we will review the different portfolio types that are important to help us manage business relationship you know, with our customers out there. We'll also talk about what are the key activities that we really need to make sure that we are working on along with our customers, and how that really fits into continual improvement on an ongoing basis, and really improving that overall focus that we do have with our customers. Because that is absolutely so critical. Then we also think in terms of, throughout the session, we'll talk about different integration points, and then also one of the topics of what would I do when I get back to the ranch, so to speak. And if you do have any questions, feel free to ask questions at the end. That would be great, and I'll go on ahead and be sure to provide answers to those. So, first off, when we talk about Business Relationship Management Institute, it was incorporated in 2013, and it's really kind of creating that global view around how do we define business relationship management, how do we inspire people to want to really get involved, the value that it does bring to the table, as well as the key traits you know, that have to be identified there. And it really is a community of business relationship management professionals representing all industries, and again, from around the globe. One of the key activities that they do provide is a body of knowledge. So again, from a global perspective, we do have that body of knowledge. That's very good. They also have some training, development, and certification, which I will talk about there. And the Institute also offers a variety of research and publications that can be used. And this is a membership organization. I do just want to make sure you are aware of that. So their certification they have is a 3-day class, and it's really focused on the role of the business relationship manager, focused on the importance of the strategic partnering that we need to do with our customers, because that's really what this is all about, being a strategic partner and working at a strategic and tactical level. And it's helping with the overall formulation of, you know, the business strategies, and making sure that IT is going to be in alignment with what those different strategies are. They'll also talk about portfolio management. They'll talk about the business transition, which is absolutely critical, because that's a key part of what we should be helping the business do, is transform themselves as well as grow themselves. As far as their role in service management, and making sure, again, how does that fit into the alignment of the overall services that have been defined as service portfolio management, and also any service levels associated with those services. And again, whether you're an internal service provider or an external service provider, this is all going to be very, very important information. And overall, again, it's quite often all about timely, effective communication that we do use on an ongoing basis to ensure that there is the proper setting of expectations, there's proper escalation that is going on, and that truly we understand the future business models, needs, requirements, etc., as the business continues to change. When we talk about the House of Business Relationship Management, at the bottom there is basic foundations that, you know, the role really has to be thinking in terms of. And as I mentioned, it's really that strategic partnering because we do want to be their providers of choice. We want to be looked at as a trusted partner, and we're sitting at the table with them when they are actually having their overall strategic discussions about their future, where they want to go, how they want to get there, what's the new business model going to be, the new strategies, goals, and objectives that's there. We want to be that partner with them. Also the business IQ, and this is one area that I really find that many organizations really don't do as good a job as what they should be doing. And to me, when I think in terms of business IQ, that is really understanding very clearly what our business is actually doing. And that is truly understanding what the, the business model is, what the business strategies, goals, and objectives are, what the outcomes that they really want to achieve. And to me, I kind of frame this up in the terms of what services do our customers use, how do they use those services, when do they use those services, and then also overall a part of that is understanding clearly what is the impact when the services do not work. And that impact is going to be maybe cost of downtime, it could be regulatory, potential fines, it could be image and brand issues that's out there. And one of the other best practice concepts that I like to introduce when we talk about business IQ is really lean IT. Making sure that we have the voice of the customer, we clearly understand through the critical to quality tree, what are the requirements and wishes, and prioritize that. But it's also having those discussions around, what is the business really wanting to try to achieve in the future. Portfolio management is key. We'll talk about that also a little bit later on in the session. It's about understanding what is a portfolio for our specific customers, what's the portfolio of the services customers are using. It's going to be looking at the agreement portfolios, and so we'll get into all of those aspects a little bit later. Also the provider domain. So again, as a service provider, we want to be the provider of choice, and whether you're an internal service provider, you still may have customers who are not taking advantage of your services. And what we find there is there's, over the last probably 2 years, there's been an uptake of shadow IT happening within the business community, where they bring in their own technologies or their own people to run technologies they may already have existing that is out there. So in all honesty, you may have customers who are a type 1, using a type 1 service where that, technology is embedded in their organization. A type 2 is a shared services, or a type 3 are your actual suppliers or vendors. And you have to think about, as a provider domain, you may have to manage all 3 of those different provider types that are out there to deliver an end-to-end service. Again, the communication is absolutely incredibly important, timely and effective communication. We need to make sure that it is always proactive also. We cannot always work in a reactive mode. And then all of this really should be helping us. How do we transform the business? Because that should be a real key thing that we want to be talking about there. The pillars is, are 4 very key areas there. It's about, they talk about demand shaping, but it's not only the demand shaping, it really needs to be from a perspective that business relationship management, from an ITIL perspective, would be working with demand management to identify, anticipate, and estimate what that demand is going to be. And because that's important, because that may have a direct impact on how well the services can actually be delivered. And then another part of that is actually shaping the demand. In other words, can we influence the customer's behavior that would change the demand, therefore change the workload on our services, which then could improve the performance of our services overall. And you can do that from a services perspective, or you could actually even do it from a technology component perspective, and you can even do it from a service desk perspective that is out there. So a very important role for business relationship management is to be working closely with the customers around the services, when do they use them, how do they use them, et cetera, because those are all patterns of business activities that help with the overall understanding what that demand is. And then do we have the ability to shape that? Exploring is all about the future. It's exploring, what the customers want to be doing, what the future business models are going to be, the new strategies, goals, and objectives, and maybe even exploring innovative ways of delivering services that we aren't delivering today that would provide value back out there to the customer. And then we have to make sure from a servicing perspective that we actually are meeting or exceeding, if that is the goal, of the service levels that we have agreed to or put in contracts if we're an external service provider that is there. So we need to make sure that we have the ability to keep the services up and running. If we do have an incident against the services, then we have the opportunity that we can restore that service fairly quickly. Again, all to stay within the guidelines of any service level agreements that you have. And then value harvesting is absolutely incredibly important. And the key word to me is value. And no matter if you're looking at ITIL as a best practice, if you're looking at COBIT as a best practice, or you're looking at Lean IT as a best practice, you'll find that word value is so important there. And the caution that I have for everyone is that we oftentimes get caught up into IT wanting to talk about how they have delivered value. They start talking about how well they've met their service level agreements or how well they've achieved in their service delivery. They've got all these projects on time and on budget maybe. But in all reality, there is only one person that can say if they got value, and that is your customer. And the best example I have of that is a customer I worked with on the West Coast, and they were a managed service, not a managed service provider, but they were an internal, IT organization, but they provided support to many external global organizations. So they weren't a managed service provider per se, but they had a lot of external, some of the larger external customers you would have on a global basis. And I was talking to one of their senior leaders one day, and he was telling me this story that he was having a meeting with one of the global customers, and they were reviewing the service level agreements. And we'll just call this senior IT leader, call him Bob. And he was having this discussion and really talking about how well they had achieved their service level agreements. And that's all we kept talking about is how well, how well, how well. And finally, their customer held up the hand and says, "Bob, can we stop?" Because then the next words out of the customer's mouth was some of the most incredible words that have stuck with me to this day. And just think about the power of the words that the customer was saying. And the actual words were, "It sure doesn't feel like that to us." So in this particular case, the organization had been meeting or exceeding their service level agreements, but the customer is still saying, this just doesn't feel like that to us. And that was really based upon a couple words that begin with the letter P, their perspective and their perception, because those are all key elements that have to go into the definition of the word value. And if you remember in ITIL, value is perspective and perception, but it is also the outcomes that the customers really do want to achieve. So that whole value proposition is really absolutely so critically important that business relationship management needs to make sure that we are delivering services and they're being viewed as value added from a customer perspective. And basically the overall roof is about what's the clarity around that role, what is the strategy that we need to be using as a service provider, and what is going to be the appropriate operating model that we would want to go on ahead and make sure that we do have in place. They also talk about a maturity level. And I'm not going to spend much time on this particular slide, but just other than to say that, in any kind of a best practice that is out there, you can always think, or process even, you can always think in terms of maturity. And in this model here, they only have 3 levels, which is one is pretty much it's more or less just the support. It's around business efficiency. Level 2 is around improving, and it's about business effectiveness. And level 3 is about innovative, and it's really about the business transformation. And again, it's all about how we manage the business needs and understand what those business needs are, and then what is the appropriate focus that IT is really going to be really concentrating on to make sure that they can have that alignment and realignment with the business needs and requirements on an ongoing basis. And you start seeing as you move up from level 1 to 2 to 3, then you actually start increasing your overall value. So again, there's good information that is there. So purpose, if we go into it from a business relationship management perspective now, this is a pure ITIL that we'll get into. It's really about making sure that we establish, because we need to go out and actually have that establishment and contact with the business. And it's important that we get out there sooner rather than later, because we do need to make that. And in some cases, that initial contact that we have with the business may be a little painful, because if there's been history that no one has gone out to talk to the business, they may be just waiting for someone to get out there from IT so that they can really have a discussion with them. But then from that point on, it does turn into a good relationship. So you got to establish it first off, and then how do we ensure we maintain that relationship with our customers on an ongoing basis? And again, it doesn't matter if you're internal or external service provider, and it's really about getting a very clear understanding of what are the business needs, what are their requirements, and being able to separate out and have that discussion around how are those different than maybe wishes or I would like to have, and that's the wants, etc., like that. And so we need to think in terms of having this conversation, and it should be an ongoing conversation that we have, because business requirements will change over a period of time, especially as the business transforms itself, as they want to change their business model. And so we always have to think in terms of having those discussions around requirements and needs. And then another part of that, establishing and maintaining that relationship, is again, because we want to be that strategic partner, trusted partner, is that they should be very comfortable telling us when, to go back and use those same words, it sure doesn't feel like that to us, because they are the ones that really have to define if they have received the value. So when we think about objectives, first off, it's the perspective and perception of the service that we have delivered as a service provider. I've already talked about that. It's about high levels of customer satisfaction that is out there. And it's important that business relationship management, because that's really one of the key areas that BRM really should be focusing on, is that overall customer satisfaction. And the customer satisfaction, especially from a services perspective, has got to be from an end-to-end perspective. Because that's really what the customer experiences, is that end-to-end service. It's not anything about what the technology silos are, whether it's the database or the server or application or network or whatever. That satisfaction is really built around that end-to-end, that when they hit the enter key, they actually get the results that they expected to get there. And one thing I will say is around customer satisfaction is that I think business relationship management not only has to address how well are we performing, but I also think another part of customer satisfaction and the questions that we should be asking from a BRM perspective is, how important is what we're doing? Because from a customer satisfaction level, we may be finding that customer is very satisfied with something we're offering and delivering, but it may not be as important as something else that maybe we're not doing as well, on. So I think, not only how well are we doing, but also the overall concept around how important is what we're doing also has to be explored. So the relationship, again, we've talked about that. It has to be an ongoing, trusted relationship. And I feel so strongly that within that relationship, and business relationship managers, again, I'm going to take a concept out of Lean IT, is go see and observe. So in other words, a business relationship manager really should be spending time with the customers on the plant floors or wherever the work is being performed, so that they can truly see, firsthand how the customers are using our services, when they use them, how they use them, and also what impacts happen when the service is not available to them. That's what really starts triggering and growing that relationship, where we do truly become a trusted partner. We cannot stay in the IT organization. We've really got to be out in the business community, and like I said, being involved where the work is really being performed, and being able to observe and see what really does go on. BRM also, from an objective perspective, has to be very aware of what any changes are going to be made to the customer environment. Now, that could be location changes, that could be business model changes, that could be new services that is going to be a part of that, environmental changes, and of course technology that customers may want to bring on board, and therefore the technology trends that are out there, business relationship managers really need to be a big part of that. And because, you know, don't kid ourselves that, you know, in all reality, our business customers out there oftentimes are just as savvy as we are around the technology that is there, and sometimes what they're looking for us is advice and guidance. And we need to be in a position to really go on ahead and do that. So again, we've talked about the overall business requirements, what we need to have out there. Again, the difference between requirements versus wishes or wants, and we need to really focus on what those needs. And we need to make sure that we can mediate if there's, you know, those requirements are not going to be able to be met. We have to then maybe go into some negotiating and at least be fair and honest with them about what are the costs of maybe what they want to have done. Because, you know, sometimes they ask for things and they aren't aware of that there's cost associated with it. And again, a good example I have there is an organization that, you know, they had a customer that wanted to have 5 nines because that was a buzzword. Everybody was talking around 5 nines of availability. And so, you know, some customers that I've actually worked with, they would say yes because they're really not allowed to say no to anything. And so they become an order-taking organization. And so they will say yeah out of 5 nines, and then they scratch their heads and try to figure out how in the world they're going to be able to do this, knowing up front they can't. They don't have the resources, the infrastructure, et cetera, in place to be able to deliver that 5 9. So therefore, that's what happens when we always end up over-promising and under-delivering in those particular situations. This particular organization actually says, okay, let us check into it and we'll get back to you. And they did check into it. They came back to the customer group that had asked for it, and they said, yep, we can do the 5 nines. It's an additional $19 million a year. And the customer group says, thank you very much, but 3 nines are perfectly fine because that's what they were used to because they hadn't thought from a cost perspective. So whenever we do define and get understanding what are the requirements, you know, we need to think in terms of what is it going to cost us to actually be able to deliver that, and that's where business relationship management will work with service portfolio management, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then from an operational and tactical perspective, you know, it's really about are the, you know, requirements being met, and are the business needs being met, and are we actually delivering that value? And also business relationship management from an objective perspective really has to understand they're going to be in a position, because they are so close to the customer, they'll hear complaints, but also they're a focal point for escalations, especially in times of like a major incident that are out there. So overall scope is really, again, you know, those services that meet the customer requirements. And again, we look at this, you know, from an understanding of what they need and how well we're delivering those services from a strategic and a tactical level. Internal service providers, it's about aligning the objectives of the business with the activities of what we do. From an external service provider, what really is there is around maximizing contract value. And again, that is all focused on both of these. Customer satisfaction plays a very big part, but there is a difference between an internal provider who typically don't have contracts. They may have service, and usually will have service level agreements, whereas external have very much contracts, you know, that there definitely is money being exchanged in the external service provider environment that is there, and how do we get that value on an ongoing basis. And remember, I've mentioned, and we'll see here just in a second, that business relationship management is different than service level management. So as promised, here is a slide on the difference between BRM and SLM. So if we think about the purpose, it's really, they're both relationship-based to an extent, but primarily business relationship management is really around that strategic and tactical relationship. It's about, from an ITIL perspective, the utility and the warranty, fit for use, fit for purpose, and make sure that from the capability perspective that the service provider actually has the capability to meet what those needs are. From a service level management perspective, it's primarily they're looking to negotiate the service level agreements based upon the service level requirements that service level management will also work with business relationship management on together. It's to make sure that we have the operating level agreements, and those are internal agreements among the IT organizations, different functional areas, to make sure that those underpin the service level agreement, and that also that they will look towards supplier management and truly understand any of the underpinning contracts that are out there to make sure that the underpinning contract also will underpin any service level agreements that have been documented. Now, remember, everything may not necessarily be an agreement. It could be a service level target or a service level objective, depending on what terms that your organization does use. An agreement is more formal document. Targets are simply just targets. There may not be any penalties or anything involved from a target perspective, whereas I've actually seen them even on internal organizations that there have been penalties when a service level agreement has not been met. So the focus, again, business relationship management is more at a strategic and tactical level that is out there. Service level management is more tactical and operational. So once the service level agreements are in place, then it's about monitoring, measuring, and reporting on how well that we actually went on ahead and achieved against those service levels that were there. And so we have those reports back out, to the business and internally to within IT. And in both cases, that focus really needs to be a little bit different on what I refer to as the service review meetings. And, you're going to have what I refer to as an internal service review meeting, and that's typically facilitated by service level management. And that's just internal, process owners, service owners, functional, managers, and it's talking about how well did we perform against certain services, because you can't discuss every service. So it may be key ones against a customer or your core services to start with. How well did we perform, and if we had some issues or challenges and incidents, problems, etc., what can we do to improve? And so the output of that internal service review could actually be a service improvement plan. And then after that, we would do an external service review, and that's basically facilitated by business relationship management, and that's with the customers. But now at least we're prepared to have that discussion with the customers of how well did we do, but we already have a service improvement plan or improvement opportunities that we've identified in place. So the primary measures when you think about this, BRM again is around the customer satisfaction. We've talked about that, and are we delivering that value? And whereas the primary measure for service level management is truly around the achievements of the service level agreements that are there. So when we talk about portfolios, there's a couple key portfolios. One is going to be the customer, and it doesn't matter how you actually go through and publish or document what the portfolios are. It could be database, it could be a structured document that you have, but it really is used by business relationship management as well as many other processes that are out there, because it's important to know who are all your customers that the service provider actually is delivering services to. And even sometimes just getting down even into a simpler question, and I do this all the time, is just simply ask the IT organization, different parts of it, who are your customers? And you'd be amazed at the answers, because there has been no discussion around who customers are. There's no documentation around customers. So you'd be amazed, as I said, to hear some of the comments back. Just within the last 6 months, I had one group tell me they have no customers. Other groups will look at it and say, well, it's the application group is our customer. And so what they're doing is looking at it from an infrastructure perspective and not really looking at it from an end-to-end perspective, that applications and infrastructure and all other functional areas within the IT organization actually does have a customer group and business units that are out there that are utilizing their IT services that's there. So again, you need to make sure from a customer perspective that we're talking to the right people. So in other words, who should we be talking to? Who has the ability to make the decisions and influence within their own particular organization? And, you know, when we have those discussions around that customer and start documenting the customer portfolio, we can start getting indications by words that are used as to how customers will see the value of what they have as an expectation coming from a service that we do provide. And a lot of this also, the portfolio really starts entering into the overall you know, service portfolio investment decision. And I just want to spend just a little bit of time talking about that because we have to think about how do we need to invest our money from an IT perspective. And there's 4 basic areas that we could focus on. One of the areas is going to be investing to help the business grow. 2 is investing in helping the business transform itself. 3 is investing to keep the lights on, or 4 is investing to retire services. So I'm going to start with the last one and talk about that first. Again, all I can talk about is personal, you know, observations and opinions based on everything I've seen over all the years. IT organizations typically do not do a good job of retiring services. They have tendencies, they just continue to add on complexity on top of complexity on top of complexity, and we really need to step back and from a service portfolio perspective, start asking the tough questions about what services should we retire. Now, we can't do this in a silo, and that's where the customer portfolio comes in, is once we start seeing that maybe we only have one customer who's using this service, and it's not a core service at this point in time, or maybe we already have another way to deliver that service, so we just have duplicate services, or do we have 80% of all of our customers use that particular service? That would be input into the overall you know, aspect of what we could retire. Then to keep the lights on, and unfortunately, this is probably the #1 area of concern for many organizations, is that they're spending the bulk of their investment money you know, around keeping the lights on. I've seen it as high as 80% of the total investment is just simply keeping the lights on. And that's some of the frustration the business has, because if there's that much money spent to keep the lights on, it's leaving actually very little money to transform the business and to grow the business, which are 2 key things the business really has a real focus on. So therefore, that's why we have to have a better understanding of what the business really values. We have to do a better job of more efficient and more effective processes and services that are, you know, delivering value from an end-to-end perspective, from a customer's viewpoint, are all important. And so this overall portfolio that we start thinking about and the investment decisions that we get into is very, you know, key item that we have to think about. And so to go along with this, I would say that business relationship management plays a key role with service portfolio management, because as you'll see here in a little bit, business relationship management is responsible for creating a business case that would be presented to service portfolio management on a new or maybe major changes to an existing service that is out there. And also, depending again what, you know, whether you're internal or external, it actually applies to both, that once you start seeing your customer portfolio, you may notice that there are customers that have not chosen you to be their provider of choice. And this is both internal, as I said, as well as external. So that can help you identify potential new opportunities and new customers, or it may just help reemphasize the market segment that you actually want to be in that is there. But again, more often than not, it's saying, hey, why is this customer or this business unit not using us as a provider? And we need to go out there and see if we can persuade them to let us be their provider of choice. The customer agreement portfolio, again, it's a structured document. It's all on the service agreements or contracts. And remember that there are contracts that are underpinning contracts. Those are often managed by supplier management, whereas actual service level agreements are managed more from a service level management process. So business relationship management is going to use this. It's incredible information they need. Service level management is going to maintain these agreement and contract areas. In some organizations, they may be separated, where service level management only has access to the service level agreements, and supplier management has access to all the contracts, but they have to be looked at together. They cannot be looked at separately for an understanding. First off, do they both underpin sufficiently the service level agreement that we have? So your operating level agreements need to be also in that portfolio, but also do we have any risks or gaps if there is some differences between an SLA and an underpinning contract that is there. So again, service level management will negotiate the SLA. Supplier management in today's world for most organizations negotiates the underpinning contract, and then we need to make sure that we have the overall involvement from all other processes and functional parts of the organization to ensure that we have the capability to meet what those agreements are. So again, it's a portfolio of all the agreements and the contracts that we would be having, and business relationship management definitely would take advantage of what is there. So from a triggering perspective, there's all kinds of triggers that could be out there. It could be something, a new business model, new strategies, goals, objectives from a business. Could be a request, for changes to existing services. It could be out of the review meetings. Customers are simply saying that, I'm tired of this isn't working very well, or those that fantastic words of this sure doesn't feel like it to us. Those are all things that you can look at that could trigger business relationship management really getting on board. And again, part of that can be coming in as inputs into any of your service level achievements. It could be any requirements that you're getting coming in. It could be new requests for functionality, requests for a new service. It could be any escalations. All of these are triggers that really could go on ahead, or not triggers, but inputs that you're going to take into the business relationship management process. Your existing service portfolios, your agreement portfolio, your service catalog, and again, your portfolio basically includes pipeline, your catalog, as well as retired services, but very definite there. Patterns of business activities, or PBAs, and profiles are also important input that is there, because that's a key aspect that business relationship management needs to know is about, what is the current patterns of business activity, what has been the historical trend on patterns of business activity, and if you start seeing that trend shifting in one way or shape, it could be more demand for services, less demand for services, or it's a change in the cyclical environment. Business relationship management really needs to be engaged and involved and aware of what those new trends may be looking at, because that really could drive further discussions BRM needs to have with the customers as well as the IT organization, could have an impact on our service portfolios and what we need to put in place. Outputs is going to be anything from understanding who our customers really are and what our market segment is that we really want to look for. We have to do a better job of really understanding what are going to be the outcomes that customers want to achieve. And anytime I see the word outcomes, I always go back to the definition of a service. And to me, this is the most important sentence in all the 5 core ITEL books that are out there. And pretty much the definition of a service says a service delivers business value. It helps customers or business achieve the outcomes they wish to achieve, and it's those outcomes that are important. And that's one of the things that I find when I'm working with organizations is that if I ask them, well, what is the outcome that this business unit wants, people in IT have a hard time defining what that really is. And that's part of, again, business relationship managers being in the business community where the work is being done so that they can get a real clear idea of what are the outcomes that they want to achieve. I was in a company this last week, actually, and it was an insurance company, and so it was very easy for them that, the two major outcomes that, certain business units, depending on what it was, wanted to achieve. One part was we want to be able to write policy. That's our revenue generating opportunities, writing that policy. And another part of it, we need to pay claims. And he says not being able to pay claims is even more of an impact, especially to our brand and image, than not writing policies. So that outcomes is very important, and I think business relationship management has to have a much better idea of what are those outcomes are. And again, a part of the output of here is that business relationship management, because they write the business case, they will know if that request for a new service or major changes to a service is going to be funded and chartered from service portfolio management. Again, we have the alignment and realignment around any strategies, goals, and objectives that a customer may be having, and then that becomes input into ITEL's, service design, service transition, and service operation also that we need to be managing. Updated customer portfolios, updated agreement portfolios are going to be output, and then again, the customer satisfaction survey results. And remember, from a customer satisfaction survey, I always like to go back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. Habit number 2, I believe, is begin with the end in mind. So what that is really meaning to me when I hear that is we better have an idea of what we're going to do with the results of those customer satisfaction surveys. And if the answer is nothing or I don't know, really consider whether it makes sense to do customer satisfaction surveys, because there's an expectation that you're actually going to use the results for improvement, and rightfully so, because that's what we should be doing. Otherwise, we shouldn't be doing the satisfaction surveys. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, don't just simply ask questions around how well are we doing, but also think in terms of how important is what we're doing. So the activities, when we get down into it, is really to define the business requirements. And again, a lot of that is based on the outcomes and help understand what those outcomes are. And requirements are going to be functional requirements. Requirements are going to be service level requirements. Those are all key activities that business relationship management would have a big part in, and then they would also have to work with the rest of the IT organization to make sure that we have the capabilities in order to meet that. And so whether it's business relationship management or service level management, we also have to be able to define what are the non-functional requirements before we get too far down the path. And in fact, that really should be a part of service design lifecycle stage, because what do we need to have in place to manage, support, and sustain that service when it does go live? I've talked already about creating the business case and submitting that to service portfolio management. I've talked about the patterns of business activities. Remember, it's about looking at those, understanding what the patterns are, and then do we have the correct controls in place to make sure we don't interrupt any of those patterns. Certain organizations in the, whether it's retail or some financial that, during the holiday season, you just don't mess with them, because the patterns of business activity is that's their highest pattern in demand on their particular services that they have. And so we got to really appreciate what that is. If we start seeing that there's a shift of those patterns of when they occur, how they occur, whether it's increased demand, decreased demand, or in a cyclical nature, then again, we got to really understand everything that's going on. Another activity is around, the overall communications, the escalation points, especially during any form of operations, day-to-day activities that's going on. Especially this comes to light when you're having a major incident or something that is very disruptive out there to the, to your business. And that could even get into not even a major incident. It could be an IT crisis. That means that we have to invoke our IT service continuity plan And again, so that communication is very important when these kind of activities are coming on. Talked about the customer satisfaction, so I'm not going to spend any more time on that. One of the key activities is to make sure that really the customer is involved in all of the service lifecycle stages, not just at the very beginning as a part of service strategy and not just in the operational, but they need to be engaged as a part of service design, service transition, and the testing especially, as well as continual service improvement. So, and it's BRM's responsibility is really to make sure the customer has those engagements so they know what their roles and responsibilities are, and they facilitate that engagement that is there. I talked earlier about the service review meetings, both internal service reviews facilitated by service level management, external service reviews facilitated by the business relationship management. And remember, out of either one of those can come in service improvement plans that may mean that there's going to be changes that need to be made either through two services, two processes, you know, whatever that is, but these are great opportunities. And those review meetings, especially the external, is all about communication with the customer. It's about understanding new requirements or how well we're actually delivering. And remember, during the service review meetings, make sure that you're in a listening mode and not a talking mode that is there. Because again, it's all about identifying what those improvement opportunities are. So as we go through the life cycle stages, these are some activities that business relationship management can be involved in. And remember also it's going to be that we're keeping the customer involved during these stages also. That's there. I'm not going to go through all of these bullets on here, but just needless to say, there's a lot of activities that business relationship managers will be involved in from a strategy perspective. We've talked about the business case, the patterns of business activity, service design, all the requirements that have to be there. Remember, functional requirements, service level requirements, you know, working with service portfolio management to get the investment and the funding for that. How do we make sure that, because remember, the output of service design is a service design package that should have all-inclusive, all of this design and requirement criteria built into that. And transition, again, how do we ensure that, you know, overall we got the customer, we're facilitating their ability to get training, we're facilitating the ability, you know, to have them perform user acceptance testing. And remember, as we go through design and transition, there's a couple other processes, or one other process primarily, but it's called change evaluation. And this is all about change evaluation should always be thinking in terms of service acceptance criteria. As we're going through some of the design, are we getting all the requirements? Are we getting all the information we need? And remember, quite often building new services is done in the form of projects. So a part of what we should be looking at also is all the entry criteria and exit criteria as we move through the different gates or stages of project management, or stages and gates between service design, service transition. So we should always be thinking about that service acceptance criteria and making sure the customer is a sign-off on, yes, this is still delivering us value that is out there. Of course, then, you know, they should actually sign off that, yes, we're ready to go to production. Once it gets in the operation, you know, again, you know, whether it's we have a IT crisis that's going to cause us to invoke a continuity plan, major incidents, business relationship management is going to be very much a focal point, escalation point, communication point. Those are all key things. And then BRM should always be focused on continual service improvement, what were the achievements we had, but also where we had issues maybe around services and not just the processes, but you know, both of those are absolutely key. And there's nothing wrong with the business relationship manager, you know, creating their own service improvement plan as a kickoff. And remember, every time we're having discussions, it should always be back to, from a CSI perspective, about alignment and realignment based upon what the customer requirements truly are. Key responsibilities when you start thinking about the business relationship manager, again, they need to be at the strategic table. I cannot stress that enough. They got to be very clearly aligned with the business, clearly understand the new strategies, goals, objectives, any new business models that have to be implemented. They will create the business case, submit that out to service portfolio management. Service portfolio management will also work with demand management, financial management, because these are all key things around making that investment decision, and BRM helps facilitate a lot of that because they are representing the customer in this particular area, and that's really a big part of what BRM is that being that liaison between the service provider and the customer themselves. Already discussed patterns of business, and again, we need to make sure all the requirements are gathered, and then also make sure the customer satisfaction. So talked a lot about the activities, the objectives, and that's really what the business relationship manager, as far as their role and responsibilities, is tailored right along everything we've talked about up to this point. Again, customer satisfaction. The only thing I would add in here is use it and use it and use it. I think the best way to do customer satisfaction is not through written surveys, electronic surveys, but it's really to go have heart-to-heart meetings as a trusted advisor and partner, sit down with your customers, business groups, maybe multiple focus groups or something, and really just ask some questions, but listen and hear what the customers have to say. And remember, there's words that are going to be used. There can be a whole difference between perception and reality, because it doesn't matter. Perception is reality in the customer's mind, and we have got to be listening for that because they are the only ones that can really tell us if there is going to be any, if we're delivering value. And if we're not, they will also be the ones that tell us that. So again, we need to update any CSI registers, identify improvement opportunities, create service improvement plans. So there's a lot of outcomes that we can, and outputs that we can actually work on as a part of what comes from a customer satisfaction survey. Again, just be very careful, because I've seen organizations do customer sat surveys, and in all reality, they don't do anything with the results. A great example, I know this is at a service desk level only, but it's a good example because I think it happens, customer satisfaction, at all levels of an organization. I was in a customer site, and I was walking down the hallway. The service desk manager stopped me and says, "Hey, Gary, can I schedule a meeting with you?" I said, "Yep, definitely." I told him how to go about doing that, because I had a single point of contact that was responsible for all my scheduling and time. And I said, "Just talk to so-and-so." And I says, "But just real quick, what's the topic of the meeting?" And it was about how do we get better responses on our customer satisfaction surveys. And I says, "Great, but let me ask you three quick questions here." And I says, "Have you ever thanked people for completing the survey? Have you ever acknowledged and said, 'We're listening'?" And he says, "Stop." He says, "You've already told me enough." He says, "We haven't thanked them. We don't do anything with the results." And, I didn't even get to the third question. And so it's really about really understanding that. Begin with the end in mind. This is a great opportunity. Even if the comments are negative, consider those opportunities, because it really is a blessing that someone has told you. It's the ones that don't tell you, but they tell everybody else that they're not happy with your service, is really when we get into some trouble. So remember, the business relationship management truly is the voice of the customer. And oftentimes from an IT perspective, we forget to include the voice of the customer. I can't tell you how many times I've been sitting in a change advisory board meeting. They're having this conversation about a change to a service, about possibly having to go outside of the maintenance windows, so it is going to create a service impact, etc. And I'll just interrupt the meeting, and I ask them point blank. I say, "Who in this meeting is representing the customer?" And I can only tell you, I think one time out of all the times I've asked that question, has there truly been someone representing that customer in that particular meeting. And that's what business relationship management really does. On top of everything else we've already talked about, they truly are, in many cases, the voice of the customer, that if they have to step up and say, well, let's stop right now until we confirm with the customer to see what they really have to say. So from this perspective, if we start talking about, okay, good idea, you know, some nice content or whatever, but what are you going to do? So I think first off, you know, you need to figure out who owns the relationship with the customers right now. And again, that's a question that I ask quite often. And the people that answer that, they sometimes aren't sure who owns the relationship. Or they may say, well, I think it's the application team that owns the relationship. So if they are the ones that own the relationship, I always ask when I'm told that, I says, do you think they're concerned about the application? Or do you think that they are concerned about the end-to-end service? And of course, 100% of the time they say, well, it's really about the application. So understand who owns the relationship, you know, with that customer, and then make sure that you do have a meeting with that customer, schedule it, get it done as soon as possible, preferably within the next 30 days. But you really have to understand also what their roles and responsibilities are. Look at your service level achievements. How well are you actually doing, or do you find some services you're not doing so well in? And identify what those are. Try to come up with, you know, some improvement opportunities that you have around that. You know, if you haven't done an internal service review meeting, you know, go on ahead and do that, whether it's driven by service level management or business relationship. If you haven't done the external service review, again, that's go out and meet with your customers. I think that's very important. And really, ultimately, get those service improvement plans in place and make sure you got owners of those, you got timelines on it, and expectations are set, not only internally, but also with our customers that are out there. And the one thing that I haven't mentioned yet that I do need to mention, because I think it's very important, is the overall concept around if you don't have business relationship management, but you have service level management, or you have business relationship management and not service level management, you really need to make sure that whatever process you do have is stepping up to the plate and taking on the activities and the responsibilities of the other process, because otherwise you're going to have some gaps in your processes and create risks overall in your ability to deliver that value back out to the customer on an ongoing basis. And if you have neither business relationship management or service level management, then you need to go on ahead and you know, make sure that you have addressed in some format who is taking on these responsibilities, because they're absolutely two critical processes. They're all business and customer focused, as well as some internal, and you can see BRM plays a very specific role. They're going to be helping influence demand. They're going to be submitting business cases, working very closely with service portfolio management. So these are really key aspects that you need to really take a look at. So with that, I do want to thank you. You know, I hope you found some value in this particular session. One of the questions that I'm always asked is around where should I start? Is business relationship management the first process I should look at? And being very passionate about that, it's very easy for me to say, yeah, why would you not start with that? But you got to kind of pull back and think. And in all reality, what you really need to do is to think in terms of, you know, what is going to create value for your customer. And in some cases, you may have some operational processes that are big pain points that you may have to look at getting done first. And remember, business relationship management, typically, because they're looking and working with the customers at a strategic and tactical level, and a lot of it has to do around the services, that if you have not defined your services, then have you actually gone on ahead? What does business relationship management have a chance to talk around? So again, you know, it's one of those, it depends, and I hate doing that from a consulting perspective, but you have to really do your own analysis, what's there I want to say that business relationship management is very important, and especially if no one is owning that relationship now, the sooner you do it, the better off. Again, I want to thank everybody very much. I hope you have gotten some value out of this session. And as at Pink, we all look forward to talking with you in the future. Thank you very much.